It says, send forth your, third line down, send forth your hand from your holy dwelling place and link this servant and that servant, because it is by you that a wife is linked to her husband. And so basically transforming them, making them into one flesh. So, and these long prayers, prayer 1 and prayer 2, it lists all these New Testament examples. And interestingly, also, especially the third prayer, sort of a middle way through, when it says bless them, bless them, bless them. After that, it says preserve them. It's interesting examples which are cited. Preserve them, Lord our God, as you preserved Noah in the ark. Preserve them, Lord our God, as you preserved Jonah in the belly of the whale. Preserve them, Lord our God, as you preserved 3 holy youths. And let the joy come upon them that the blessed Helen had when she found the precious cross. So the imagery which is there is something enclosed into the chamber, probably symbolic of the bridal chamber, that they enter into the when something. So basically, the idea is that it's some kind of reminiscent of the death and resurrection. So they enter into the bridal chamber, and then they emerge from it, but they emerge different. And basically one of the fruits of that is the gift of children. That is, since the gift of in one of prayers says the heavenly dew is give them the dew of heaven from on high and the richness of earth. And so the heavenly intercession, the heavenly intervention is called upon so that it would change them and make their their produce, the result of their marriage, the fruit of their marriage, to be a divine gift. So to be a consecrated gift of God as a new life brought into the world. I'm way over time, so I just want to ask if there are, and my throat is sore, so I would probably ask to if you have any questions. First communion, then cup, because historically, what probably was you have a wedding in the church with presanctified communion, and then you have the marriage feast. You proceed to marriage feast, and this would be a first cup when you drink at the feast. It would be a common cup, also symbolic of their unity in marriage.
But that would be function. Symbolically, that would be unity, yes. But what would be function? The function of
first cup at the
common cup after communion.
First cup at the feast. When you come to the wedding feast, I mean the eating and drinking in the late antiquity was also heavily ritualized. I mean it's.
So it was never even a replacement of communion.
No.
Never.
No.
Speaking of presanctified liturgy, the only time that we have presanctified
Mm-hmm.
liturgy is Lent.
Yeah.
During Lent, there's no weddings permitted.
No.
Where do they get the presanctified gifts? I mean, is this the reserved sacrament that we have on the altar?
The presanctified gifts were used in the late antiquity. They were used much more widely. For instance, they were used in Constantinople at a certain point on all Wednesdays and Fridays throughout the year. You would have a presanctified liturgy, and every day it's even in the canons of Trula that every day during Lent you would have to presanctified liturgy, although it fell into disuse at certain point. And there was a traditions of using presanctified communion with in connection with also, for instance, with imperial coronation or with wedding. But
the weddings always take place on Sunday?
I would think if it's presanctified communion, they would probably, although I do remember there were in beginning of 17th century in Russia, there was I do not remember when exactly it was celebrated, but there was a liturgy first and then wedding. And so the communion was, it was wedding of one of the, who was to be crowned to be a Tsar. and so it was, the communion was, he said he would receive communion during the wedding. So there was a possibility of having both in the same day, but I would imagine that the idea of giving them pre-sanctified communion would be that there would not be a regular liturgy celebrated. But, I mean, it could be different.
On the same token, Father George, as far as I recall, that Father Stephanos, right now, back then, wrote a doctoral dissertation on that topic. And as far as I remember, the Divine Liturgy of the Pre-Sanctified Gifts was celebrated on Wednesdays and Fridays. And people used to, throughout the year. And that later on, towards the Quintus Sixth Council, it's being reduced for the Great and Holy Land, since because of the character of the Great and Holy Land, when it fully developed, there was no other option but to do pre-sanctified on the weekdays.
But the wedding, though, the wedding ceremonies and the sacrament usually takes place on the Lord's Day.
It looks like not necessarily, because in Syria, where the Liturgy of the Pre-Sanctified Gifts originates, faithful used to get together on a regular basis on Wednesdays and Fridays to take communion. And after they took communion, it was the end of the fast. So basically, if the wedding ceremony took place at the dismissal part of the liturgy or afterwards, it makes sense, because they stepped in the new liturgical day, the Lenten fasting is over, and
Were they required?
the matrimony can take place.
Was a couple required to fast since it was going to receive communion?
I would imagine.
Confession?
I would imagine that they would fast, probably. I mean, if it would be, I haven't read anything which with respect to what time of the day it would be celebrated. Would it be a afternoon, which is the usual time for pre-sanctified liturgy, or it would be morning, or basically maybe some sources would have this information. But I would imagine they would. I mean, the fasting before Eucharist is required. I mean, for.
We assume that both spouses to be Christian.
Yeah,
Was that
Orthodox
always
Christian.
the case? There was no pagan and Christian marriage?
I think you have even certain canons which would prohibit that. And definitely, I mean, even as said Theodore the Studite in his Epistle 50, I think, even says that if these people have certain, well, I mean, if it's their second marriage, so they are canonically prohibited from receiving communion at that point, at least, as a sort of penance, as their epithemia. It makes no sense to celebrate a wedding for them, since they cannot receive this sacrament, so they cannot receive even that. So at that point, it was very connected. Today, we would differentiate, probably.
Well, how can we reconcile what the tradition of the church is with interfaith marriages today between Orthodox Christians and non-Orthodox Christians?
I would say there is no room. It's the recent phenomenon.
So we're going against the very essence of
our faith. I would say so. So, and on the same token, excuse me, Father, regarding the fasting before the communion, back in these times when the Divine Liturgy of the Pre-Sanctified was celebrated on Wednesday and Friday, people observed fast on Wednesdays and Fridays, but they didn't eat anything. It was kind of the preparation that we as the clergy and the faithful have since midnight until Sunday morning, so they didn't eat or drink anything until Divine Liturgy was celebrated.
Okay, but we're talking simply about food, fasting from eating.
Well, fasting from eating and the food is associated with the abstinence of all the other things. It goes hand in hand.
But is there a mention as far as confession is concerned as part of it?
Well,
The
the rite of
preparation, I'm
confession
saying.
we have today, Vitaly, correct me if I'm wrong, did not exist in the form we have it today.
Well, it was
We
not.
are talking about late 2nd, early 3rd century.
Oh, at that point, no. Well, it was especially the connection between the confession and the Eucharist. It emerges.